Hey everybody. Today's video is going to be about something different. I wanted to discuss what it is or how we can access our self-help, self-work. It's what I call soul work journey. A lot of times when people find out what I do for my profession, they ask me, well, what do you do to get started? How do you begin your self-work journey? Like, when you know something's wrong or you know you want things to be different, it's really overwhelming. Where do you start? And this is such a good question. And it is overwhelming, especially if you've lived a certain way your whole life and you've behaved a certain way your whole life. And now all of a sudden you're like, you know what? Enough is enough. I don't like the way things are. I'm finally ready to realize that, I am the common denominator in all of my unhappy life circumstances. So what am I going to do about it? And so I would say having that awareness honestly is the first step, so that the fact that you are at a place where you've decided you're ready to change something about your life, that's step one. You've already done it. Step two is to go, okay, pick one area at a time. We get overwhelmed, we get bogged down when we think that we have to solve our whole life all at once. And the secret is that our life is like a house, right? There's a foundation, which is our core, which is, maybe our soul or who we really are. And then everything above that, all the levels up above it, are held in place or are stable because of the foundation. So instead of fixing like this room, that room, these rooms, which is a valid approach, you can totally go top down, or you can come from the bottom up. And you can say, well, what's the core within me where I want to focus my work, where I want to dive into myself. So you can either approach it from like, well, I want to resolve my job, I want to resolve my romantic relationship, I want to resolve my family circumstances, whatever it might be. Or you can go, I want to figure out who I am fundamentally, and I want to change certain parts about the way that I interact with myself and the way that I interact with the world. Because I'll give you a secret, the way that you interact with the world is always going to be a commentary and a reflection on how you interact with yourself. The whole world, everything is a mirror. Everyone you're interacting with is a projection of yourself out into the world. And whether you are loving and kind, or whether you are harsh, or whether you are, cruel, or whatever it might be, withholding or generous or whatever, it's all a reflection of how you interact with those components of yourself. But that's later. So the first thing I want you to do is to identify one piece, one place, one aspect. If you decide to go with working on yourself, one aspect of yourself, or one area of your life. Now, if you go with the area of your life method, be prepared, because if you're going to try to solve your career, it's going to be connected to like who you are inside. So it's all going to go down to that foundation regardless. It's just whether you want to ease your way down there or start there. A good place to begin, quite honestly, and a lot of people struggle with this because it's not hard. It is hard though, I gotta tell you, but a good place to begin is for you to say like, what do I like? See, our souls are here to be joyful, to be happy, to connect to this physical world in a way that brings the most joy to your human form. And that's because you're here with a certain amount of skills, and those skills get exercised through joy. We are happy when we get to do what we're meant to be here for. We are happy when we get to do what brings us joy. But so many of us withhold the things that we like or the things that we're good at from ourselves for a variety of reasons. This is why the work can start here, though. You can start by saying, who am I and what do I like? A lot of times we shift onto autopilot with things. We behave in ways that aren't necessarily in alignment with our truth because we've become used to it. Perhaps we had a parent that didn't like the kind of movies that we like, so we just talked ourselves out of liking those movies. Perhaps we had a friend that made a judgmental comment about the kind of music that we like, so we just stopped listening to that kind of music. Self-work is all about reclaiming yourself. It's all about discovering who you are and reclaiming that person from all the ways that you've diminished her over the course of time. My cat is here. So in order to reclaim, you have to discover. So you must have a willingness there to say, well, what do I like? Who am I? What are my preferences? What are my values? And so that values gets a little bit into the realm of like some grit and some shit, where my cat is like scratching my hand, so I will pat him. Where if you say to yourself, well, what are my values? That requires you to know, I value these things over these things. It requires you to make some assessments based on morality or your integrity or, your preferences, your perspectives, whatever it might be. And once you make those assessments, then action is required. So self-work is all about assessing and then taking action. So assessing for me means gathering information, figuring out the answers to some questions, and then you can sit with them. You can know what you like. You can know what you want to do. You can know a truth about yourself and not do anything with it. You can just sit with it and get adjusted to it. You can start to change your language around inside your head. To the external world, it might look like you're not doing anything, but what you're doing is you're becoming comfortable with understanding yourself on a different level. So that's the assessing phase. Action phase is when you put your assessments into action. It's when you start to modify your behavior to match the information that you have about yourself. So you start to say to yourself, oh, I know that I really value art. I'm going to start to surround my space with art. I'm going to start to go to art museums. I'm going to start to commission art. I'm going to start to take an art class. I'm going to align my behavior with the information I have about myself. This can be really challenging, so go gentle with yourself. If we are not used to being the person that we are inside, it's like a shock to the system to start to show up in the world in the way in which we truly are. It's hard. It takes immense courage, especially if the person who we are inside is different than what we've surrounded ourselves with, what we have taught ourselves is okay, or what we, have limiting beliefs around. So you have to be willing during the assessment phase to say, well, why do I feel like I have to hide or diminish this part of me? What are the beliefs that I have been accepting or forcing myself to live with up until this point? And where will those conflicts be? Where will that, be a little bit difficult for me to integrate? And then you start slow. You step out in small ways. You align with your values in small ways. You make small actionable choices though. And over time, you always opt into picking your truth. You always opt into picking your values. You always opt into picking your integrity. You always align with what is right for you, regardless of whether it's what old you would have done, regardless of whether it's what your mom would have done, regardless of whether it's what somebody else is telling you to do. You assess what you want, what's right with you, and you choose that every time. You don't have to wave a banner. You don't have to make an announcement. You don't have to tell everyone that this is what you're doing. But slowly and surely, as long as you go forth and you continue to make consistent choices in alignment with the truths you discover about yourself, your whole external world begins to shift. And you start to attract people into that world that are more like you. You start to be able to accept the people you attract into the world that are more like you. Because this is an exercise in trust. The more you say, who am I inside? And then you start to act in alignment with that person, you're learning you can trust yourself to be yourself. And so when you meet others like you, that you align with, that you match with, that you resonate with, you can trust yourself to have and hold those people in your world because you know you're also those people. You belong together and you know that you love that about yourself because you've given yourself permission to be yourself. So honestly, a good place to start is to say, who am I? What are the things that I like? And be willing to answer that question. For so many people, it's hard for them to know, what are the things that I like? What are the things that I want to do? what are the things that are important to me? What are the things that I value? And it feels almost like a secret when you start to realize these things about yourself. You feel like, oh my gosh, is it okay for me to feel that way? Is it okay for me to like that thing? Is it okay for me to think that thought? And I want to give you full permission. Yes, it's beautiful. It's always been there. It's there whether you acknowledge it or not. But if you want to have a beautiful life, if you want to start to do your soul work, your self-work, if you want to self-actualize, these are the first steps to take. Hearing what you're whispering, the soul, like hearing what the soul is whispering to you, being willing to listen to that, being willing to contemplate it, being willing to imagine what it would be like if you could do these things. And they can be really, really small or really, really huge. It doesn't matter. There's not one thing that's more important than another. But being willing to listen to those whispers and then to take action in alignment with them, that is it. That is so important. If you have any questions, please let me know.